Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am making the Hope handbag by Mrs. H. It takes very little hardware, this bag, and I think it's super cute. And then I added a tassel because I'm tassel obsessed at the moment. And it's not on a D-ring, it's actually on like a smaller O-ring thing. But it's got bag feet and 2 zippers, and that's the only hardware that you need for this bag. On the inside, it has a zipper pocket and a slip pocket, which you can't see because it's black on black, but slip pocket there, which I split in half. And yeah, it was a pretty quick sew, so if you'd like to see how I made this, please stay tuned. Alright, so I have just embroidered my logo on the base, and I'm going to start by putting in the bag feet. And it might actually be easier to use this ruler instead. So I'm just going to measure in where I want to put the feet. You can actually put feet whenever you want, whatever you feel kind of more comfortable with. See, I already want to make that different. I want to bring them in a little bit more, because if they're too far out, I don't think that they hold properly. So I'm going to put them there. I'm not giving you the measurements because you can work it out where you want to put yours. As long as they're even, it doesn't really matter. So I've just put my marks on, and I used a friction pen, but I didn't need to. You could just use a normal pen. And then I'm going to use my cam press hole punch and make sure I punch the correct holes since I've drawn extras. If you do use a friction pen and you're worried that you might do that, just iron away the incorrect marks. I'm doing this very awkwardly, I'm aware, but I'm trying to do it so you can see. So now I've punched my holes, I'm going to put my bag feet in. So I have these cool domed bag feet. I haven't done a bag with bag feet in a while, so it's a bit fun for me. So we're just going to put it in the press, and you always put the dome face up for anybody that's never used them, and you just push it down until it clicks. You're not trying to squish it super duper flat, that's not the point of it. You just want to push it until it sits flush with the fabric. And you feel it. As you're pushing, you can feel how much it's moving. One more. So there's not a lot of hardware in this. There is 2 zips and the bag feet, and that's all you need for this. And you could skip the bag feet. I never do because I've embroidered the logo, so I now want that to sit up out of, you know, puddles and things. And I've also put some heavy stabilizer on there, so I ironed it on with it this way up with a layer of waterproof canvas, not waterproof canvas, baking paper on top so that nothing would get damaged. And then I embroidered the logo. So the logo helps this stick on, and so do the bag feet. So that's your base done anyway. We're also going to do a tassel on this. So I have these cool little clips, but they've just got a really small end. So I'm going to show you how to use the tassel template to do that. But we'll do it at the end because it attaches to the end. So the only other things I've got in here are my 2 zips and the rivet I need for my tassel. So that's all we're going to need. And obviously zipper tape, which I forgot to pre-grab. And because I'm doing Harry Potter fabric, we might use a rainbow because that's just cool. So I'm going to just pre-cut the zipper tape. So it tells you how much you need. I am doing, instead of the pocket that's in the pattern, I'm doing my Tory pocket just because it's quicker. The other style of pocket is really good if you're going to put a facing, because the way I do facings with my pocket is a little bit awkward. So if you're going to do a facing, you're going to want, like, do the facing way if you're going to put a vinyl accent on the outside. Right, so they're my 2 bits. I am still going to wrap this up, even though there's only a tiny little bit left. It just sits neater in the box. And if I tidy it as I go, I don't end up with crazy amounts of mess around. So, let's start with the lining. I am using the black waterproof canvas that's on my website. because black goes with everything. And I can't get maroon. I know lots of people have asked for all these crazy different colours. If I could get them, I would, I promise. So I am doing a Tory pocket in the Tory pocket size, but it does have the 2 pieces if you want to do it her way that's in the pattern. So I'm going to fold this in half and I'm going to stitch down one side like this. I'm going to stop with the needle down, pivot, back stitch to there, leave a gap so that I can turn this out and then just continue on. And yes, it's gathered here, but I can cut that off in a second. I'm not super worried about that because once I trim this, it flattens out. It's just the thread that was holding it tight. So I'm going to grab my zigzag scissors or pinking shears, whatever you prefer to call them. I personally love saying zigzag, so this gives me an excuse. And I'm just going to cut off the excess fabric. Now with waterproof canvas, you don't have to interface it, so it is a bit quicker, which is awesome. And then, through the gap that we left, I'm just going to turn the pocket out. So I'm just using my thumbs to kind of shove it through the hole, like that. And then I'm going to get my flute cleaner and then push it all out. So the flute cleaner is my turning rod. I did try chopsticks, but they're just not for me. I tend to push too hard and push the chopstick through the thread. And so then I have to unpick it and fix it, which is not fun for anyone. So my corners are not super cornery. They're a bit crappy. So I'm going to take my stiletto and I'm just going to dig it in and kind of lever out that corner until it's super pointy, because I like pointy. So we're going to do that to all 4. To get super pointy corners, you have to make sure that you do cut your lining down. That one's pretty good. Because otherwise there's too much fabric if you don't trim that seam allowance, and then you won't get pointy corners. Awesome. So I'm just going to finger press this because the waterproof canvas loves it. You can iron it if you wish. And if you've used fabric, I would suggest ironing it. And now I'm just going to stitch along that top edge, which is also going to close the gap. Now, if you need to, if you left a bigger gap than me, you may want to put a wonder clip on it. So you just, you know, put it on. You may need more than one, depending on what size your gap was. And what fabric you're using. Waterproof canvas tends to sit right where I tell it to, which makes it much easier. And then we're just going to trim off those tails. And so that isn't going to be our slip pocket. So I'm going to take one of the main lining panels and then line it up. So this bit here is actually the bottom of your bag. So you want to make sure that you don't put it down like this, because then it will be on the bottom. So that's just something to think about if you've never made a bag and this is your first ever one. So I'm going to line it up right there. And now I'm just going to stitch around the edge. So I'm doing an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. If you are rough on your pockets, you may even want to do 2 layers of stitching. Although this thread is pretty strong. So this thread is from Vardman Threads. It is bonded nylon in a size M40, which I think translates to like Tex 70 in American. I don't know what the 40 stands for, so please don't ask me. I genuinely have no idea. So I'm going to put one in the middle. So this is how I determine middle. I put my little fingers on the edge, and your hands are about the same. So you just let them fall and meet in the middle, and that's the middle. That's who I am. You could also measure it with a ruler. but my way's quicker. And then trim off your tails. Put the excess tails in the bin, and then you don't have to clean them up later. So my bin is literally at the end of my table, so I can just shove it off. I love it. Slip pocket is done. So now we're going to do our zipper pocket. So I'm going to do it my way. The other way that the pattern does it is sew the zipper to each piece and then do your facing and stuff like that. And it is a nice way to do them. This way is just quicker. So I've got my zipper swatch. This is a 7-inch one. I've actually separated this one from all the other ones because I use this one the most, because the Tory pocket is always the same. So I have drawn my box about 1/2 inch from that fold. And then with this right sides up, we're going to open this out, and the side we didn't sew on goes to the top. And then we're going to stitch around the lines that we drew. Right there. Actually, I saw this new thing, so let's do this, where you don't stitch the short ends. We're just going to stitch the lines. And then we're going to jump over here. I'll trim that tail in a sec. We'll go the other way. So I've only stitched the 2 long edges, but I started and stopped where I drew that other bit. I've never done this before, so we'll see how it goes. Might be better, might be the new way I do things. I'm just making sure that I trim those tails though, so that they don't disrupt anything. So I'll show you this side. You've just got the 2 lines. And then we do everything else the same. So I'm going to put it over the edge of my table and pinch it to snip it in the center. And then I'm going to cut what looks like the middle and then triangle out the corners and stop at the stitching. People swear by this, so I'm curious. And today's the day I'm trying new things. Alright, so I'm going to push this up and I'm going to finger press it. And then I'm going to flick it and I'm going to do the same to the other side. Now, even if this was fabric, I would iron it. Oh no. Do you know what I've done? It moved while I was stitching. Can anyone else see how crooked that is? I am going to have to fix that. So, to fix this, you can't. You need to do a new lot. So, right, let's try that again. So here's my fresh one and my fresh pocket. It would have been fine if I had have noticed right before I started cutting. But once it's cut, it's just done. So we're going to do that again. Draw my box. Line it up. And this time, so that I don't have that problem, I'm going to take some Wonder Clips and clip the thing together. And we'll get a ruler. Since now I'm paranoid a little bit. We're going to move it up and do it there. So I'm going to clip there and I'm going to clip the other side and then it can't move. Right. That's how you prevent that problem. Should have done it from the start. Oops. And I'm still in that black thread that gets stuck. So as it's unraveling, when it gets to the very bottom, whatever they did when they raveled it, this one roll just doesn't want to go. So I'm going to start in the corner. We're going to stitch and we're going to back stitch. And then I'm going to spin it all the way around, jump to the other side. Again, I will trim that bit later. Back stitch. Pull it out. Trim my tails. And I'm trimming that jump as well. And then I'm going to check the back and make sure that it's level. It is, because I clipped it. This is why sometimes you should clip things. Right, pinch it. Clip it in the center. Shove your scissors in that hole. Get down, and I triangle out the corners about 1/2 inch from the edge of the stitching. Give or take. Then we're going to go the other way. Triangle it out. And then again, I'm going to finger press. So if this was fabric, I would iron like that. And then I would iron like that. And then shove everything through the hole. And then I'm just going to finger press this down flat. Oh, look at that. Lovely. I think I like that better than stitching the ends. That's pretty cool. So I'm going to crack the zip. And these zipper pulls, I bought a bunch of these and I decided not to put them on the website because 1 in 5 give me grief and won't go on that zipper tape. This one's fine. So I always like my zippers to close to the left. So I'm going to sit it like that on my table and then pick up this, making sure that the zipper pocket's open, and just lay it over the top like that. Now the edge of the zipper should line up with the edge of the fabric because I cut them the same size. And then I'm going to stitch over the short edge first because I will be zipping this open and now it can't come off. And I'm going to stop with the needle down, zipper open, continue going, 1 stitch past the end so I can go over the end, and then come back the other way. So the edge of this foot is running up against the zipper. If you wanted to get closer, because you like the look of it or whatever, you would put a zipper foot in and then you could get closer to that edge. But I don't mind it. All right, trim your tails, throw them in the bin. And then this should just fold over perfectly the way it was before. And now we're just going to stitch down each side. So we're not going to stitch the bottom shut because this is where I'm going to turn the bag. And we're going to back stitch at the start and the finish to lock this in because we don't want it coming undone later. So then again, I'm just going to fold this over and it should pretty much be sitting right where it needs to be. And back stitch. So that's now our zipper pocket done. Now we're up to our other zipper. So you want to crack an end, and I don't know why I call it cracking it, but it makes me happy, so whatever. And then we're just going to fold down this at a right angle and stitch it down. So I'm going to grab a clip and hold it in place, and then I'm going to do the same to the other side. So make sure that they are in fact even and stop at the same spot because it's important that your zip is even. Otherwise we've got more problems later. So that's even there and there. So now I'm just going to put a couple of stitches on the edge of the zipper tape so that we won't see them, but so they're going to hold the zipper in that position without a clip. Now, I know there's something called the butler method where you just do it later. I don't want to. One new method of video, I think. Nothing wrong with the butler method, but you just have to remember to turn it out, and you need to make sure it's going to be turned out at exactly the right spot so they match. Right, so that's that done. Now I'm going to completely separate the zipper because I find it easier to work with. That's just me. Now that I know that I've got it on the right end, if I separate it at first, I run the risk of turning the same end, whereas once it's together, it's not a problem. So I'm going to take my lining and a ruler, apparently my giant square one, and we're going to measure in what the pattern says, and then clip the zip down and drop a clip, because, you know, dropping clips is what I do, apparently. So then I'm just going to run this along here, like so. More and more clips. So I'm going to use lots of clips just so it doesn't move. And then we also need to measure from the other end. And where we have to stop, what I do is I tuck this under at a 45-degree angle. No? Yes, 90-degree angle. My brain's not functioning on all cylinders today, it would appear. So I'm just going to line that up, even add another clip in, get to that end and turn it down. And underneath. I'm turning it under, not over. And then we can grab our top accent panel, which should also be the outside fabric. And then I'm going to clip the ends together first. And then I'm going to hold this down and add this in to the other clips. Like so. So now everything is clipped together like that. Now we're going to do the same to the other one. So we get our zip and our ruler. I'm going to measure along, clip it down, and then get some more clips. Now I could have just sewn one at a time, but by doing it this way, I can now chain stitch them. Love a good chain stitch. So I'm just pinning down the zip. I'm not pulling on it. I don't want to stretch it. I don't want to do this. I just want it to sit where it needs to sit. Then I'm going to grab the ruler, measure from the end, and then turn it under like that. Like that, and pin it. And then again, we can grab the other one. Another thing I'd like to point out is that I made the zipper side. So this one here, the zips are going to end on the same end. That's something I just subconsciously did, but I do it to all of my things. So I've trained my brain to do that, apparently, which is kind of cool. So I like my zips, where possible, to close all in the same direction. That's just a thing that I do. Oh, and there is the wonder clip. So now I'm just going to pop this under. I'm going to stitch and back stitch. And then back stitch there. And then clean up the clips, grab the second one, and do the same thing. And then back stitch. Pull out a tail, trim it off. Right. Ta-da! Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tail of the clip and I'm going to grab one wonder clip and just clip it back so I won't accidentally stitch it later. This just keeps it out of my way. Like that. I don't really need to take that off until the end. So now we're going to put these right sides together and I'm going to line up where the fabric, the outside fabric meets the lining. because that's something that you will notice. So I'm going to put a clip either side of that because 2 clips holds better than 1. And then I'm going to line up the bottom and then add clips as you see fit. Apparently I'm adding a lot. And then I'm going to flip it over and do the same over here. 1 there, 1 there, 1 at the bottom, and then clip in between. And that helps, if you clip the top and the bottom, because you cut them the same size, they should fit, but sometimes you might pull something more than the other one, so it doesn't work out. So it's good to do it that way. So I'm going to start here, I'm going to stitch, and I'm going to back stitch. And then I'm going to come down till I get to that seam, and then I'm going to angle it off. And then we're going to go down, because that's what the seams do. Pull that out, trim it off, flip it over, because I like to start from I like to go from thick to thin. So whether that's backwards or like bottom to top or top to bottom, I always like to do the thickest part first because it's easier to run off thick onto thin than the other way around. There, and then down. Like that. Trim off those tails. Pop them in the bin. Now I'm going to stitch the bottom of the bag. Like so. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one each side and pull outwards. So, and you just want to keep pulling until this seam lines up with this seam. I'm then going to push one in each direction. And then you can put some clips on it. And then we're just going to stitch across the base. Like so. Trim off your tails. Now, when we do the other side, we want to make sure that this seam is folded the same way as the other side so that it will sit flat in the bag. If I do it that way, somewhere in the bag will have to have that twist, and you don't want that. So, another way you can do it is put your fingers in and just pull out until it meets up. And then again, wonder clips. Don't use pins with your waterproof canvas because you're punching holes in your fabric because it's waterproof. I'm making it less waterproof. Obviously, sewing it makes it less waterproof, but you can rub stuff onto your seams if you need it, the waterproof. But pins is just more and more holes. Trim. Trim. You can even grab your zigzag scissors and trim off this excess if you want. I'm going to. It will help it to sit in the bag nicer. Another good thing about the zigzag scissors is it helps prevent fraying. Not that this fabric really frays, but cotton does, which is usually what I use for lining. Okay, one done. It almost stands up by itself, which is cool. So now we're going to take, actually, before we do our outsides, let's do our handles. So these are the handles. So we're going to get some waterproof, not waterproof canvas, oh my goodness, double-sided tape. Sorry, I was up very, very early driving to the airport, and apparently my brain is not functioning on all cylinders. Right, in the middle, we put some double-sided tape. I am then going to peel the backing off, put it in the bin. Well, you want to fold each side into the center. 1 and 2. Now, if you can't eyeball the center, draw a line with a pen or a friction texter. Or if you're doing fabric handles, iron them in half first and then bring each side into that iron spot. So like that. So what you would do is you would iron it first and then bring each side into the center. You can also add wonder clips if you want to. I'm going to add 3 so it doesn't come undone while I'm doing the other handle. Because sometimes double-sided tape likes my vinyl and other days it really doesn't. I also like to try and push both sides at the same time. I find to get a more middle part, I guess. Alright, clip, clip. I'm going to crank my top stitching up to 4 so that it looks fabulous. And then I'm going to start at this end and I'm going to stitch and I'm going to back stitch because we should always back stitch. And you won't see this bit anyway. And then I'm going to stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And I'm doing the folded side first. Now this vinyl, it's not my normal vinyl. I got it from an upholstery guy that was closing down. So I know it's about to give me grief. So instead of turning and going the other way, I'm going to start on the second handle. Like this. And then I'm going to cut off this first one. And without twisting it, I'm going to bring it down. And then I'm going to stitch the other side from the same direction. So I'm using the other side of my foot to work out where I want to stitch. And this will help any twisting that may occur. So this is really good if you've got like a stretchier vinyl. And then I can trim that one off, and without twisting it, I'm bringing it down and then doing the same again. Starting from the top, work my way down. Like that. I like it. And then I think we actually want to do a second lot of stitching. So we find the center, like this. And then we're going to measure out from each side and then stitch from there to there. Might use a friction pen and a ruler. So if that's the center, I want to go to there and to there. So I'm just using the friction texter to mark it because I can wipe it off. But I can also very clearly see what I'm doing right now. So I've got these little marks. So now I'm going to fold it over again. You may or may not want some clips for this. I also don't know if this machine will stitch this thick. I'm not convinced that it will. But we're going to try. You never know until you try. Worst case scenario is I have to go and do this on my thicker machine. So therefore my advice to you is if you're using a domestic machine to make this bag, make fabric handles because this is very thick. The pattern did have fabric. Now, I never go backwards when it's super thick. I always snap a needle when I do. Okay, that actually worked quite well. Slowly and no reversing. You just lift it up and go back into the first hole. I have a mini video on different ways you can backstitch. I can take that clip off now, trim all the tails right down, and there we go. That is now our handle, which is fabulous. I'm going to do the same thing again. So find your mark, and I'm just putting the clips on the outside of the mark so that they're holding it but also not in my way. You can put one in between as well if you want to. And then under we go. So this is very thick. I don't think a domestic could do this in vinyl. Fabric would be alright though. I think that's the mark there. And then I'm just going to go back through the last two holes like that. And then trim off all of those tails. And we're good. So that is the handles done. Yay! Let's put on our base. So, I've already got the middle of this from when I put my logo in, but let's find the middle of the main panel pieces. This would also be a really cool bag if you bought a panel to make a bag out of. Nice embroidered panel right in the middle of this would be great. So, if you've got a front and a back, pick that now because the way the logo sits, I don't really. So I'm just going to clip it from the center outwards, like that, and then same to this side, lining up that edge, and then I'm just going to stitch it. I'm going to go back to a joining stitch length. Backstitch at both ends. Trim off the tails. And then we're going to flick that under. Is it under or over? I think it's under. That way and stitch it down? Or is it on the base? I never remember this bit. I think it's this way. You know what? I'm going to check. What's wrong? We're going to make sure this panel's flat. And we're going to stitch along the vinyl. So I'm going to go back up to a joining stitch length. I'm going to stitch. I'm going to backstitch. I'm doing 1/8 of an inch from where the vinyl joins the fabric. And backstitch. And then trim off the tails. Right, other side. Same thing again. Join in the center. Work your way out. You want your clips to face your vinyl, which is what I'm doing now. I'm just doing it so you guys can see. Because I can just watch it's like a mirror. Anyway, back to a joining stitch length. Do the same thing again. Stitch, back stitch, off we go. Whoa. See? The thread did that thing again. I always like to thread with a new end. I find it easier. It's less fluffy. Not that this thread really goes fluffy. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to do that last little bit again because I don't trust that thread. Trim off all of the tails on both ends. And then again, fold the vinyl down, crank the stitch length up to the same as the other side. And then I'm going to stitch, I'm going to back stitch. And then I'm going to back stitch at that end as well. And so now I've got this, and I like it. So same as before, we're going to bring this up and we're going to stitch down the side here. Now you may or may want to use some clips. I'm going to use a couple because I like clips. And then we're going to do the same to the other side. Clip, clip, like so. And then we can just sew straight down the side, making sure we back stitch and go back to a joining stitch length. Now, if you're on a domestic machine, when you cut your foam, just take out the seam allowance on all the sides, and that will make it easier to stitch for you. Back stitch at the end, pull it out, and then we're going to box out these corners down here as well. So in the same respect, I'm going to put my fingers in there and push it out. Ah! Always works better if I do it that way. There we go. And then I'm just going to add some clips. As many as you want. Now you might want to open this seam out so that it's less bulky when you're trying to stitch over it. Like that. And then same with the other end. So I put my fingers at the corner and just pull out until it comes down and meets the other side. Open out that seam that goes along the edge there. Especially because it's got foam in it. So like that, lots and lots of clips. And then I'm just going to push the bag down flat like that so that I can get in here and stitch it. We're going to go, oh, don't be like that, thread. Come on. We're having such a good time. It's just right at the bottom of the cone. Sometimes it's alright, but it doesn't like to start with issues, which is fair enough. Okay, pop all that behind us like that. Squish the bag down, push it down so that this bit sits flat, and then up we come. Stitch, back stitch. And then back stitch at that end as well. And then we're going to do the same to the other side. So if you need to squish it before you put it down on the machine, just squish it by hand. So instead of doing a back stitch there, I just lifted up and went back through the first lot of stitches to lock it all in. I'm going to do the same to this end, since my machine is misbehaving. And then I'm going to take some scissors. I'm going to take my vinyl cutting scissors, because there's vinyl in here, and just trim that down to about half. You don't want to get too close to the stitches, because you don't want to wreck them. but half will make the corners of the bag sit in there nicer. So we're nearly there now. We're going to turn our lining piece right sides out. We're also going to make sure that your zipper pocket is open so that we'll be able to turn the bag through when we're ready. And so then I'm just going to put the lining inside the bag and start clipping it all together. So now I want to open this seam out flat, and then I want to make sure in the lining side, we want to make sure that that seam going along the side is going to sit the same way, because we don't want any twisty bits if we don't have to have them. There and there. Clip along like that. And then the same with this one. So we want to check this seam and make sure it's going to go in the same direction as the other one. And that will stop all problems later. And then I'm going to clip here and there. I'm just doing the short sides first because we're about to have to measure and put in our handles. Join that end. And I'm putting lots of clips on this because there is a bit of strain going on. So now I've clipped the two ends. I'm going to take my handle and a ruler and I'm going to measure where it needs to go. Right sides together. Measure it in. Now it actually needs to twist like this, so it might be easier to put it in, randomly clip it, and then we can adjust it when we're ready. So I'm going to take a ruler and I'm going to measure, and then I'm going to use 2 clips to secure the handle in place like that. And then we're going to do the same to the other side. So I'm going to get my ruler and I'm going to measure where the first part of the handle has to start, just there. And join all the layers and put a second clip on that handle to hold it in place. And then just clip the other side. So the handle's in. I'm going to do the same thing again. So I'm just going to push it in, not really worrying about where I'm clipping it, but clipping it so we don't lose the end. And then I'll start with this end. It's got to go to there. So I'm going to grab some clips, clip it on, grab the backing or the lining. It's not really backing, the lining. And then do the same to this end. So there and there, like so. Then I'm going to add 2 clips in between there just to hold it in place. And so now we've clipped the whole edge, we've got to stitch it. Now this might be a bit tricky. I'm going to start at this corner, but I'm just going to start in a little bit from the corner because we do still have to turn the corner. So I'm going to stitch, I'm going to back stitch. I'm just going to stitch currently once over those handles, but I'm going to come back and reinforce them in a minute. And then we're going to come up to this corner, needle down, and then I'm going to roll the bag around the machine like this. to get into here. Now I'm going to squash the top of this bag down so I can see what I'm doing. Because squashing it helps, I promise. Needle down. Stop in that corner right before you get to the end and then twist. Now it is a little bit fiddly, but it's worth it because it's going to look fabulous. And then again, we're going to bring it up. Whoops, knocked off a badge. My child likes to play with them. So if you ever see them changed in a photo, it's not me unless I knock it during a video. It's my child. He likes to decorate. And who am I to tell him no? And more to the point, why would I? Alright. So then we're going to go to here. And I'm going to go back to the start. And then I'm going to backstitch. Now, before I go cutting and turning, I want to reinforce these handles because those 4 handles are going to take the weight of the bag. So I'm going to stitch just before them and backstitch, and then go over them a second time and backstitch. And that extra amount of stitching will help if people tend to overfill their bags, which I am always guilty of. I'll trim all the tails in a second. I'm just going to do all of the stitching first. And then this one as well. Right. So now I can trim off the crazy amount of tails I have and throw them all in the bin. You won't see them, but it's just a nice habit to be in to always trim them off. Okay, so before we turn it, what we want to do is we want to trim off the excess at this corner so we get it nice and pointy. Like that. So we're going to do the corners. Like that. Then I'm going to come into this bend here and I'm going to trim out a bunch of the bulk right at that center part so that it turns nicer as well. You don't have to take all of it, just a little bit will greatly help the cause. Push it into the bin. Okay. Zipper pocket that we made sure was open. We are going to go in, we're going to grab a corner. I always pick a corner and then push it in so I can grab it like a puppet. And then I just pull. So I kind of use my body weight to roughly hold the edge and then I'm pulling that corner. Now, because of all the foam and stuff, this might be a little bit tricky for you, but just persevere. So what I'm trying to do is I'm basically trying to squish the bag so it's skinny enough to go through the zipper pocket. Once you get the first bit, the rest just kind of follows on through. So there's the bit that I grabbed. So now I'm just going to take the zipper pocket and kind of try and turn it out and engulf the rest of the bag. Because if you can get it into that zipper pocket completely, then it's game over and it'll definitely work. So I just pull it over like this and you just work your way around slowly. You don't want to pull so hard that you break something. And I know this looks ridiculous, but if you can get it to that point there, I promise the bag will turn through super easy. See? And there it goes. I know it doesn't look like much at the moment, but that's because I haven't pushed out all of my corners. So I'm going to get my hands right into those corners and push them out. You want to start with the bottom corners, and then you come up and do any top corners you need to do. So I'm going to use my turning stick, for the top bits. You can also run your stick along the seam there. So I've got one point out. You can use your handles to kind of pull out the main bulk, and then I'm going to go back in through the zipper pocket to push out those corners. Now you can use whatever you want as a turner, but I highly recommend a wooden flute cleaner. I do know quite a few ladies that have gone and purchased one and they love it. So we're just trying to get out this last corner. And there it goes. I know it's sitting weird, but just bear with me. So, now that everything's out, I'm going to stitch the pocket shut. So I'm just going to tuck under those raw edges and pull. And then you can crease it. Now, if you've got a fabric tag, now's the time to put it in this seam. I know it's less seen in a pocket, but people are always less likely to pull a tag out of a pocket as opposed to like a main area. I know personally, if I've ever bought anything and the tag's on the outside, the first thing I do is cut it off. And so therefore I imagine there's quite a lot of people like me. The tag outside the bag kind of annoys me. It's not because I don't want to know who made it or I don't want to show it off, but just this random bit of fabric, it just, I don't know, it irritates me, so I always cut it off. Same on teddy bears. If it sits out of a seam, I'll cut it off, but if they've sewn it like flat onto the teddy bear, it can stay. Alright, so we're nearly done. You can take off those clips that we had attached to the zipper now if you wish. So now the last thing to do, well, not second last thing to do, is to top stitch this down. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go around with some clips to hold it all in place. Now I might top stitch this on the other machine just for something different in a video. I can stitch it on here. You just squish the bag so it goes under, but it might be fun to play with the other machine. It doesn't get much use. It just sews on a lot of patches for guys and their vests. So I'm just turning out this corner the same way I did the other one because I want it to be as pointy as the other three, and it's just not. That's better. Everything rolls off my table. I wonder if it's on an angle. I have that problem a lot where everything's trying to run away. So I'm going to roll this seam so that it's sitting right on the edge before I clip it. And the clips are just basically helping to hold it in place. You don't have to clip it if you don't need to. That's entirely on you. So let's go to the other machine and top stitch this down just so that you can watch how the other one works and helps with top stitching. So this is my cylinder arm machine for those of you who have not ever seen it. And the reason it's amazing is because I can just slot the bag over because it sits up off the table. I really do love this machine and I should use it more in videos, which is what I'm attempting to do right now. So all I do is I lift up the foot, so it's got a foot pedal that lifts it, not a knee lift on this one. So I'm going to start at a seam and I'm going to stitch, and then I'm going to go back through those first stitches, and I'm just going to slowly bring the bag around. There we go. Take the clips off. And then I'm going to pivot We're going slowly because this is quite thick here. Oops. Oh, actually that wasn't even a thickness. That was, I have wound the thread around there and it got stuck. I was trying to move the thread holder out of your way and it didn't really work in my favor. So, I've got to rethread it, which is fine. Seems to be the story of my life today. So this has got a thicker needle in it too. This is a huge needle on this machine. Not that I necessarily need a giant needle to sew this bag, it's just it's got one. See how easy that is to top stitch around because the whole bag can just sit over it. It's awesome. Off camera, I do a lot of top stitching on this machine for this exact reason. Then we're going to pivot. I'm going to trim off that tail while I can see it. And then again, we're going to adjust the bag so that it's going to go around here. And then just take the clips off as we come to them. You also want to make sure that that zipper is out of the way and you're not stitching it. There's one bit, there's two bits, excellent. Now this seam right here is quite thick because I forgot to trim it out, but the machine will still go over it. This is a very cute bag. So the machine can actually go quite fast. I've got, as you can hear, I've got a servo motor on this. So I have slowed it down so that it won't go full speed because it's a lot. So we're nearly back to the start now. So I find this machine easier to do top stitching. And then we're just going to trim off the tails like that, and that one, and there we go. Oh, and this one on the inside, don't forget the inside one. How cute is that? And the top stitching is lovely. This is actually a binding foot. It's got all the binding parts, so it's a thicker foot, so I use the edge of the foot as a guide for my thickness. So yeah, let's go finish off the bag. Next step is put our zipper on. So, I'm going to bring the zip out so that it's not twisted at that end. And then I'm going to get my zipper head and I'm going to thread one side and then I thread the other. So it's only about halfway in and then I push the other half in and I can look at the top to see if they're lined up. And then I just wiggle it until it comes on. Like that, which worked fantastically, can I just say. Now I don't have a metal end cap, so I'm going to use a piece of vinyl. So this is the width of the zip times double the width of the zip. So whatever size you're using, that's what size you need. I am going to actually put 2 strips of double-sided tape because I find one doesn't quite hold well enough. So I'm going to put 2 next to each other, like that. And then I just rub on them a little bit to make sure that they have adhered properly to the vinyl. And so then I'm going to grab my zip and I'm just going to fold under those 2 ends so that it's not going to stick out, but only a little bit. And then shove it all the way in and fold it on so it's even. So this is what you should have. And because there's 2 bits, it should stick. So here, it comes in flush with the zip, but it's not sticking out up here because we've tucked in those edges. It doesn't matter how much of an edge you tuck, whatever makes you happy, really. So I'm just gonna press that down, and then I'm going to stitch around that. So I've gone up to a slightly longer stitch length because that's what I want, and I'm gonna start along a long edge, not over the zip. So we're gonna stitch 2 forward, 2 back, and then needle down and pivot. Like that. And then I'm gonna move the whole bag around so that I can do the other side without it pulling. And then to do that last edge, I actually swing the bag back around this way so I don't have to try and drag it through there. I'm going to move them because I'm going to drop them all in a second. Right, and so then we're going to go across the end. Now, if you want, you could do a crisscross in there as well. Whatever you want, really. But that end is now on and the zip is done. So technically your bag's finished. But I'm obsessed with tassels, so I'm going to make a tassel that attaches to the zipper. So I made sure that my little clasp fitted before I started. And this is the tassel template that's 4 rivets. So I've already cut roughly what size I want my tassel. So I'm going to put it along the top edge. There's like a dotted line that says, put your vinyl here. So I'm going to use masking tape so that it doesn't leave residue on my template, and I'm just going to tape that down like that. And then, do I want it that long? No, I might want it shorter actually. So I might just go up to, I can cut it all and then cut it off. But I like to stand up for this. Let me just readjust so you can see. So I'm going to turn it upside down because it has numbers along here so you can count where you're at. And you just need to go through each of the slats and cut it like so. I have done most of them already. So you're just cutting the slits to make your tassel. Now if you wanted thicker tassel pieces, you could just do every second hole. You could just do all odds or all evens. And because the template is numbered, that would make it very easy to do if you wanted to. So we're just going to cut like that. Make sure you move your hand out of the way just in case you get yourself. That's not a fun day, I promise. All right, and then I already did this because I accidentally didn't hit record. I thought I did. I hit record and stop instantly. So anyway, that is the tassel, and then the little mark here on the tassel template, you need to cut to there. So then, now because I'm not using a D-ring, this may not fit, but the idea is that we put it in and then fold it up to that line and then up to the top like so. But we need to add some double-sided tape to that. So I'm just going to rub that because it wasn't quite stuck. Right, so now we're going to fold it up to that line, which is where the tassels end or start, whichever way you want to look at it, and then up like this. And now I just need to fold it over and over. Like that. Look at our tassel. Isn't it fabulous? Now, I'm actually going to cut a little bit off because it's probably a bit too much. So I'm going to chop it to there. I also need to take off the double-sided tape. So you can make the tassels as big or small as you want. I don't know. I want a big one. But you could have it a lot less than that if you wanted to. We could also even potentially wind it a bit differently. The thing is, you need to have it a little bit flat so that you can get a rivet through it, because we're going to rivet this together. So this is a bit tighter. There we go. So there's a nice, slightly more rounded rivet. And so now I want to grab my hole punch. And we're going to hole punch through all of those layers right between the top and the start of the things. You know, push down nice and firm to make sure it goes all the way through. And then I'm going to push that through all those layers and it should go lovely because it's nice and squished. I'm going to put the cap on like that and then just squish it down. So it still stayed relatively round, like it's not super flat and squishy. And then that will be attached onto the zipper. And it's just, hold on, you can't see now. It's just a bit of fun. And it's easier to open and close your zipper. So it's just a little bit cute. I don't know. I just like tassels. What are you going to do? But that is the bag all done. So I hope that was helpful and I hope you enjoyed the video. All right, guys, bye-bye.